few months you'll see things turning around. So yes.
Yeah,
yes,
just
I
to
think
jump in
these are
to
welcome.
say
Yeah.
very quickly, sort of like the head of programming at HBO Asia is a woman. The head of programming at Netflix Asia is a woman. So again, but it's yet to be seen whether it translates to more.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily.
No, it's not
equate.
that simplistic.
Because they have their own battles.
Yes, and they have
Yeah.
the market to contend with as well. But yeah, certain changes.
So that's really interesting. So what you're telling me is that not just the financing aspect, which is now seeing different channels coming to the rescue of women who have projects that they want to bring to the market, but you've also got different platforms, which are, you know, it's quite a change in the last 10 years. You've got the Netflix and you've got all the other platforms. So there are many more platforms which women can use to bring their stuff out. But coming back to the question of content, which, you know, as you say, that a lot of these things, you made the point earlier that sort of line between indie cinema and mainstream cinema is now much more blurred, that it is now about content, and you've got mainstream actors actually turning towards indie roles, what used to be indie roles. The more we see of women in roles that are not stereotypical, the more we see women in, I mean, we all come from pretty patriarchal societies, and the roles have been quite limited. You've got the lover, you've got the mother, you know, there are not that many in between, but that's changing, you're saying.
Drastically.
That's changing drastically, and surely that will have a filter effect.
Yeah.
If you're seeing all these roles for women, strong women in front of the camera, it will have a filter effect to women working behind the camera. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think all of us, that's the next step really, with people in the industry getting more committed to having diversity in the crew, in the unit, and to do that, as you said, you know, taking it as a sort of personal vow that you will be part of this, that you will participate in this, and if that happens, then change can happen very quickly. And I think at the end of it, it's not really about men and women. I mean, here's Bernard sitting here with us. It is really about the way you look at things. And my first documentary was about women filmmakers in India, which I called The Way I See It, because it was about perception. It is about the way a woman looks at a story and looks at characters and people. And I do believe that there is a difference in those two visions. And the closer you can get to that, the better. And it can happen. It can happen. It's not just about aesthetics or about understanding or the attitude that you bring to a storytelling. It's also about the market. It's also about the audience. So it has to really, the change has to seep through all these areas. So today, if you're looking at, say, an average 18-year-old boy or a 20-year-old boy, he's not going to go see a film only because of a star. He'll go because there is interesting content coming. They go, hey, I have heard about this story, and so I'm going to go. Or I'll go because this star is doing a very unusual film. He's doing a film with a message, or one of our leading stars has just played the part of a real, it's a real story, but it's about the man who really made sanitary napkins accessible to village women, you know, so he's created a revolution. But a year ago you would say, are we going to talk about this over the dining table? But today you can. So these are the things which are going to happen and change. And coming back to Rituparna's films, they were about gender, they were about questioning really gender stereotypes. It was about bringing in the idea of the third gender. It was bringing in the idea about sex changes, whether these things are possible within the Indian mindscape or the social scape. And in a middle class scenario, with characters sitting around the dining table, you could have a discussion about sex change. You could have a discussion about being gay. And these were happening, they were new.
Yeah.
And it's not too long ago that this was possible. Even today, this is taboo. Even today, it is criminal, actually, because the laws haven't changed.
We're bringing power into the discussion, which is educating young women, and I'm glad, Sangeeta, you brought up audience. The reason I live in the UK and work in Southeast Asia is I still believe there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the audience in Southeast Asia through education. So to give you an example, for a lot of my work has been to put out empowering characters to educate the mass audience
Yeah.
with things as basic as, when it comes to marriage, you have a choice. So to give you an example, one of my previous films, which was an adaptation of a very popular mass romance novel, I would say, and I was given 5 novels to choose from. There was only one that I could bring myself to adapting, because in that film, in that novel, the audience, the protagonist, the female, chose her destiny. In the others, I realized, although it was a sort of Mills and Boons type novel, the ultimate hero was not the hero in the book, was not the hero in the film. The ultimate hero was Allah. You were going to sacrifice everything because your reward will come in heaven. So an example is, I've been raped by a man. I will beg him to marry me because he has raped me and I'm no longer worthy.
Oh dear.
And that is one of the biggest blockbusters in Malaysia. Ombak Rindu, played by a half German, half Malay actress, Maya Karin, who plays this character. So there's a lot of work to do with, again, with Container Anna. Although she doesn't have a choice, by the end of it, she calls him Babi, you pig. That's the only thing I can do. I can call you a pig and I can walk away with, there's nothing else I can do in court. You have to lafaz, you have to articulate it. So in many ways, it's yes, rather than just the financing, it's at the end of the day, it's all about the audience. It's all about the audience and educating the audience, bringing power back into the situation.
Yeah, but again, it's not that simple, because a lot of things which are changing in the cinema register are getting regressive in television. So just as you talked about this, we have these big family episodic dramas which go on for not just months but years, and gosh, you'd have to see them to believe them, because they have nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with real life, and the ideas that are being perpetuated are extremely regressive for women. So they're like family ideals, and how, what the father says is the gospel truth, and you, the son, you have the duty to do this. And so all those ideas about duty and carrying on tradition, which we've questioned and gone beyond in cinema, are again being brought back in television. And a large audience for these are middle-class housewives.
Correct.
So again, if you're giving a message out through television, it's probably seeping far, and it's a big concern. I think you go watch a film, you come back, but with television, you're doing this, it's there in your drawing room, and you're consuming this every day.
Jenny, what do you
So
think
they need to
before
be
we
questioned.
open it up to the audience? It's we're talking about the content, and where do you see that?
Well, I mean, I can talk about the stars, because when you guys talk about, you have to bring stars into the independent films, or to make people want to watch it. I just remember recently I have a meeting with Channel 4 about my next projects, and I'm talking about the lead character, because I want it to be female, East Asian, and I was like, well, there's, can you recommend any? And then she just like, there's none out there that could bring audience into the cinema. But then she just like, well, why don't you train one? Why don't you bring someone? Why don't you just give someone a chance and then make them become a star? And that's kind of just, it's like, why I have to find someone that's already established. There are so many like talented, potential, great, stars out there. And that's the one I should aim. And I think that's, that we could create, more stars if we if we keep looking.
So the message seems to be there are many, many more opportunities for women now to create their own vision, to actually find a conduit for it and a platform for it. The battle's not over by a long, long shot, but we're making some inroads.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask the audience if, to participate, to ask any questions they may have. Thank you, G. Yes. Sorry, the mic's coming to you now. Thank you.
Hi, this is predominantly addressed to Sangeeta and Jenny. When you got your first break as assistant directors, what is it, do you think, was the quality that you had that got you that position? And secondly, what is it that you had that a male counterpart didn't for that very job? And Bernard, perhaps you could throw light on what it is you find in the women that you choose to work with. I know you've talked about hard, but what would you define as that hard in a positive way in relation to positions as directors?
Yeah, I'm not saying that my route into filmmaking is the sort of hard and fast rule. Is probably the exception. So with my first work with Basu Bhattacharya, he was certainly a filmmaker whom I greatly admired and who I knew personally. And I think my strengths that I brought to the table, because with art house cinema, it's about really working with a core group of people right through. So it's not as if pre-production happens and then people come in for production and then another set come in for post. It's people who really see through the entire project. And we were right there from the germination of the idea to really thrashing things out, to outlining a story. So I think a lot of my strengths as a writer came in of good use. I'm not saying that it wouldn't for a man, but I think he recognized those strengths and brought me in. And it was the nature of the story itself, because it was about a college professor, and I was teaching at St. Xavier's in Bombay at that time. So it was about bringing in real stories and real experiences. And we finally did go and make the film in St. Xavier's as well. So it was interesting that way. Yeah.
I think it was passion, I showed that I really want to be on sets, and I want to help to make this film complete. As assistant director. And I think that, once you have that passion, people can feel that. And then also experience, everyone starts from no experience. But then once you have one film, there's always another one. You just have to keep pushing yourself and keep convincing people. I have so many rejections when I started as an assistant director.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah,
because
it's always stuff in the interview. It's just, as I say, it probably is my appearance. It just they don't believe. They say, they just think like, can you really do it? I was just like, well, I can do it if you give me the chance, and I can show you. But there are a few lucky ones. They got me, and then they will have me again. But sometimes I would just say that that's just fate. If they don't have me, then that's it. I just have to try other companies or other producers. But yeah, at the beginning it's always hard. Once you have the ability, it will just show, and I believe that.
It's interesting that you asked specifically the question of the assistant director. It's a very good question, because actually the director on set is so reliant on the assistant director as well as the producer. And I suppose if you are a female director or any director, as Jenny sort of said, it's about constantly making decision and being seen as confidently making that decision. And on set, the person who must be on your side is the assistant director. And offset is the producer who will stick by you and support you. Because it's not just a lonely position as a director, you are constantly making decisions. But coming back to, so just in general, the role of the assistant director on set is sometimes more dynamic and more visible than even the director.
Yeah.
Because the director actually sits behind the monitor and is very focused in his or her own world. And the first AD is sort of literally working with the actors, with the makeup department. And interestingly, my favorite first assistant directors are women. But even then, and even my favorite assistant director is a petite woman who manages to get the respect of everybody, you know, very macho gaffers to male actors. So I think it's about, yeah, the energy, but interesting question. I would end by saying that whether you're a female director, whether you're a director, your assistant director is almost like your spouse. And your producer is like your parent. And you need your spouse and your parent to be behind you, 100%.
So on that note,
Yeah.
I'm afraid we don't have more time for questions, but we do we have time for one more question, if there is, no? Yes?
Thank you very much. The first thing I'd say that I don't know anything about Asian film, Asian cinema, but I was curious. There were some very positive comments made about the progress being made, and especially around content and narrative, etc., and and about the amount of women getting involved in film. I was just curious about, does it really come from? You probably give loads of examples otherwise, but does it mainly come from middle class perspective? Or what about the topics, more marginalized women in Asia? Or is it very much sort of aspirational and middle class in terms of the films being made?
Do we have
Our film?
have a quick response to that, please?
Yeah, I'll just jump in very quickly again. So like, to also answer it another way, the most successful films in Southeast Asia are still genre films. So genre films are still for a very, very wide audience. And in genre, if there's one thing I'll throw in, it doesn't answer your question directly, but if there's one thing that really needs a lot of development, is women in making genre films that are still true to that perspective, and not being completely dominated by men.
Okay.
I think there are lots of films not just coming from the middle class point of view. There are lots of there's like underground society. And I think we just need to keep making it, and then hopefully you will go and watch it.
Yeah, I think, again, if you're talking about Indian films or diaspora films, it's interesting that we have a very wide diversity in stories now, and some are based on real life stories. There are biopics, there are sports stories, there are roles in which you wouldn't have seen women before at all. Very recently, some of our biggest films have been about women wrestlers, about a father who trains 3 daughters to become gold medalists, and the whole story really is about the shaping of these girls. Now there's a question there, of course, where is it the father who shapes them, or do they shape themselves? There's also the Muslim girl who wants to be a pop star, and her mother helps her. There's a very abusive family environment, but the mother really drives her to realize her dreams. And these would have been, little oddities before, but these are now the big films. These have made money, they've been successes. And I think it's really that, the diversity of being able to tell stories of small towns. In India, the metros are animals and beasts by themselves. The small towns are far more interesting because that's where all the friction is happening between modernity and tradition and everything that's happening within the family environments and values. A lot of the stories now are about small town real stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all three of you. I think you will all agree that was a fascinating discussion. Do join us downstairs, and maybe you can get a one-on-one with one of them.
And thank you to PAWA once more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Nehru Center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's trying to.
Absolutely right.
Well spotted.
Gee, I blame you for that.
No. No, it should be 2018.
Very observative, you know. It's just it's a genuine mistake.
Great. And I'm just here to just say a few words and to do a few thank yous before we can go down to have some drinks. That was absolutely fascinating, and I hope it's sort of inspired some of you to find out a little bit more about Asian films. At the moment, I should have mentioned earlier, the UK Asian Film Festival is on, and it's running for a couple more weeks, I think. Sangeeta's involved in that. On Monday here, so do look out for that. Also, PAWA partners with the London East Asian Film Festival the last 2 years we have, with their Women's Stories section, and that happens in October every year, so look out for that as well. I'd like to thank Sangeeta, Jenny, and Bernard. That was, it's a real eye-opener to listen to all the complexities of filmmaking. It is quite a huge area for us to try and cover this evening, but I'm sure we can carry on discussing things downstairs. I've actually got 2 brothers who've made films, so I'm now thinking maybe I should make a film, become a female filmmaker. I also am here to sort of do a little bit of pitching for PAWA. Tonight is, one of our free public events where we hope to raise awareness of issues facing women. But as I said earlier, our main task is fundraising. And I just want to tell you a little bit about 2 initiatives PAWA's been doing, coming up, actually. One is a collaboration we're doing with Learning for Life. And the last 2 years, we've been working with Learning for Life to try and build and run a floating school in Bangladesh for teenage girls in the Haw Valley, River Valley, which floods for 8 months of the year. And so last year we had 2 runners in the London Marathon who helped, and a few other donors as well, who helped us to raise enough to build the boat. But before we can go ahead with building the boat, we also need to raise the money to run the school. And so this year we have 2 runners in the London Marathon again, Wes Masters and Erwan Muhammad. And if you would like to help PAWA to achieve this challenge, then do support. You can support it by sponsoring them to run the London Marathon. And if you'd like to find out more about that, then just ask any of the PAWA team who are here tonight. And we also have a desk with information downstairs. We also, if you would like to do your own challenge, then come and join us on the 13th of May at Regent's Park. The PAWA Walk team will be there at the Superheroes Run, and you can run or walk, and it's 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. And I'm going to try and show you a little film about it. Let's see if I can work this out. This was actually made by a female filmmaker, this little film.
list them. Bright orange t-shirts. Pan Asian Women's Association. Amazing charity. I know quite a lot about this charity and I'm all for it. It's incredible work that they do. So they're over here. If I could get all when you say it, do you say PAWA? Yeah. Can I get all the PAWA lot to like make some noise on the count of 3? 3, 2, 1, PAWA!
So yes, that was made by Kamina, a woman filmmaker, and see, it's great fun. So do come. It's just come and have a family day out, bring a picnic, and you'll be raising money for teenage girls in Asia as well. I'm sure all of you had the benefit of education and know how important that is. So help PAWA to give a girl in Asia this gift. Now, as I'm sure you all know, these sort of events don't happen without a lot of help and support. And so I'd like to thank my PAWA team who are here this evening, who are helping out with all the preparations. Also, everyone at the Nehru Center, I always can never pronounce it right. Akana, I think, Ravi, Den, and of course Viva, our Deputy Director General here. And Kamal for chairing this evening. Thank you very much. And Kamal also put a lot of work into putting the theme together and the program. And of course, all of you for coming this evening. So I'd like to now invite you to come downstairs and have a drink, and we can carry on talking downstairs. Thank you.